welcome to Comic Books and You. Today we are finishing up City Boy with this 6th issue. At least it didn't run any issues over or wasn't canceled before the 6 issues were done. But I have a sneaking suspicion that we won't be seeing Cameron Kim anytime soon. But this is basically the end of this little campaign of City Boy trying to figure out what happened to his mother while the bad guys are trying to manipulate him. It didn't end like I wanted it to. Let's say it's fairly weak in terms of an ending, but it's still, I think, better than Doom Patrol was, thinking about it in the long run. As usual here, let's go over the characters. Our heroic sociopath shows Evely how much he misses his mom throughout this issue, and it unfortunately doesn't work as well as the author probably thought it would. One of the main factors being that Cameron's sociopathic behavior and sociopathic tendencies are not addressed at all throughout this entire book and in book series. His power allows him to connect to all cities at all time. He can get multiple avatars of the cities at full power, everything. What is the real problem is that he is mentally weak, so he can't control his own emotions. And that's basically how he was at the start of the series as well. So once you start thinking about it, he didn't really grow in terms of a hero or heroic character throughout this series. He might have gotten a few helpful tips from very, very reliable people, but he's still roughly the same character he was at the start, which is not what you want in these types of origin miniseries. We get a little bit more of Dr. Mokkarison in this one, but all we really know of him and from him is that he's evil, he works for Darkseid, and, he's a scientist and a religious figure. We haven't gone anywhere into his background, into his origin, into how he behaves or why he behaves like that. He doesn't have his own set of powers. He has skills in basic science. In the end, he's just a mad scientist with goons, and it's not even his own goons. They're Intergang goons. And he's actually really, really bad at planning things out and trying to manipulate people. We have the heroic bunch in this issue as well. We do see basically all the heroes Cameron interacted with since the start of the story. We have Swamp Thing, who helps him and defends him. We've got Nightwing in Bloodhaven. We've got Batman in Gotham and Superman in Metropolis. And they have a few lines. It's actually pretty interesting, but I'm not sure all of those characters really should be the main or important characters in a City Boy origin story. Once again, that makes this a little bit weaker than it should. And so this story ends with Cameron and Swamp Thing more or less fighting as the Thing tells him that he's causing the city to keep growing and taking over the green. I don't even have a picture for this because that old page was rather boring and uninteresting. If they were actually fighting and not just bickering, it would have been a little bit better. Thankfully, things get a little bit more exciting as Cameron gets hit by an Intergang stun gun, and Swamp Thing gets blown up, basically. Doesn't kill Swamp Thing because he's, Swamp Thing. But Cameron is not completely stunned. He's basically, his higher functions are gone, and his lower functions are still working, so he's still able to not talk, but at least receive orders. A little bit weird, but, it's for the sake of the story. Dr. Mokkarison goes to him and tries to manipulate him so that the story can keep growing. And the way he does it is that he doesn't want anybody to be forgotten, like Cameron's mother was forgotten here in the forest as she died. As this is going on, basically the avatar of the 3 cities in which Cameron visited. We didn't see him visit Gotham in this series, but you have the prequel in the Free Comic Book Day book. And they wake up and they start being causing trouble, so our heroes have to start fighting them. Don't ask me why the spirit of Gotham is a giant rat and the spirit of Bloodhaven is the bat. I'm not going to ask questions either. In order to make sure that Superman, Batman, and Nightwing don't come to help Cameron, Darkseid does send a bunch of parademons to start causing trouble at the same time. So we've got an evil avatar of the city plus a bunch of parademons in the 3 major cities here on the East Coast. So a pretty bad situation overall. In the forest, Cameron starts creating an avatar in the shape of his mother under the guidance of Dr. Mokkarison. But rather than letting Cameron connect with the spirit, which is what he wanted from the get-go, he starts shooting him and the avatar. And this causes the other avatars to attack the respective city. Once again, I'm not sure if the plan was well thought out here. Cameron kind of wakes up and starts realizing that he needs to have the city stop fighting. And Swamp Thing starts wrapping up the Intergang gangs and Dr. Mokkarison as Cameron realizes that he has to let go. As he needs to accept it and he needs to realize this is going on, Cameron starts limiting his powers, and all of the avatars in the various locations collapse. And as the plan kind of failed, well, Darkseid sends the parademons to grab the Intergang gang and Dr. Mokkarison, and apparently brings them to the apocalypse that they currently have. Cameron and the Hero Bunch stand in front of Cameron's grave, Mom's grave, and Batman says something really dumb. At least you can be grateful that you had a chance to love her. I'm not sure if it's in relation to his own trauma or that he's trying to cheer up Cameron. We don't know if Cameron's mother loved them, and we'll never know. Even though we're in a universe where bringing people back from the dead or speaking with the dead is not that complicated, it's DC. As this all ends, Cameron goes back to Bloodhaven, and that's it. You can see why this particular book is a bit of a letdown. I'm going to talk about that more later, but we're missing the important bit of the end of an origin story book. We don't have any super fights. We don't have any actual resolution. The big thing is, yay, Cameron realizes his mom is dead. What about his dad? I mean, we haven't talked about his dad in the entire thing. I mean, we have but two parents normally. So there's too many things lacking in this final issue to make the entire thing a cohesive thing. If it was a longer series, would it have helped? Maybe, but we would just have had more filler here, because that's what it feels from most of the books, that they're just fillers. So I'm not sure who is to blame here or what is to blame, but we're going to talk about that a little bit more. The one really great bit about this book is actually cover. We've got all of our main characters on there, including the supporting. Because I would really say Swamp Thing, Cameron, and Dr. Mokkarison are the three most important characters in this particular book. And the way they're positioned in the triangle there, this is perfect composition with Nightwing and Superman in the back, just to give us a little bit more appeal. There's really nothing wrong with this cover. It's actually a really strong one, and probably one of the better ones in this series, which have all been pretty good, at least in my opinion. The branding is also really, really nice. I really like the City Boy branding that they've been using. Too bad it's probably a thing that we'll never see again. Again, and still, this is an American floppy. Nothing we need to expect out of that. It's a very basic floppy cover, binded like it should, with staples and cheap-ass paper. And what I actually found annoying in this one is just the sheer amount of ads in it. Normally, it's not that big of an issue for me unless it really breaks the reading experience. But here, they just really got under my skin for some reason. First one we have is on the back flap here, and it's an ad for some sort of AR board game called Panic in Gotham City, or as Arkham Asylum presents, or something like that. I'd have to see if it's any good. Honestly, I've got better Batman games that I can play. The Batman miniature game is actually a really, really good one, but it's hard to get in North America since it's actually a Spanish game. You have to look around for it. There's a big ad, 2 pages for Titans Beast World, since that's the big event that's starting now. I do like the covers that they're putting on there. The Titan number 6 cover is actually really strong with an angry Starfire. The event is going to be pretty long, and there's a lot of books in it. I am going to get most of it, or most of them are on my pull list, except the very specific, like Action Comic, Nightwings, things like that I don't have on my pull list. I'll have to dig as well for Waller Rising, because I didn't think I needed it or wanted it, but it might be important since Amanda Waller is the reason behind the whole Beast World thing. We'll see how it goes. The back page as the Titan Beast World actual checklist. So it's November, I've got both of those books. Beast World Evolution was fun. It's some of the introductory stories for Beast Boy in Titan's group. Beast World #1 was actually fairly good. It's by Tom Taylor, and I know a lot of people don't like him, but it works fairly well here. We'll see how the event goes. It might be good. It might be terrible. It really depends. At least the start is more interesting than Night Terrors. We get a Batman Santa Claus team-up comic for December. 4 issues released throughout the month. You know what would have been better here? Just release it as one book. Very easy for people to buy and put underneath the Christmas tree rather than 4 separate issues, especially since they're all released in the same month. This is a really, really poor marketing setup, especially with how comics are being sold right now. Also, this is another Batman miniseries. We needed another one, right? We do get a nice big 2 pages tribute to Kate Giffen. The guy kind of deserves it. The first page is this here, some of his art and some of his characters, while the second page is a bunch of quotes from important and large creatives, including the editor-in-chief of DC, Jim Lee. Very good tribute, in my opinion. Deceased, War of the Undead Gods. Yes, another thing that looks super boring. I am not interested in this at all. Deceased is just annoying. That's another Tom Taylor book. I mean, the guy gets work, at least. I don't like some of the stuff he did. Some of the stuff he does know how to write, but I think his biggest problem is with the editors. I'll see more when we go through Beast World. We get a nice ad for the Spy vs. Spy Omnibus at the end. I don't know how expensive it's going to be. They do say kind of cheap, but omnibuses are always really expensive for no real good reason. The more I know about Spy vs. Spy is actually the NES game. I've seen a few comic strips, but not that many. But it overall seems very funny. And our final back cover is an ad for Aquaman 2, which is tracking to actually do even worse than the Marvels. We are reaching peak clown world in terms of superhero movies. Really, throughout this entire series, we don't really see Cameron in his actual costume in any of the books. He never has the mask pulled back up. His costume overall, if we see here, the vest looks really cool, but the rest is really, really simple. It would need a full revamp, if you ask me, to make this character a more permanent fixture. He is lacking something, and the fact that we don't see him actually use it as a costume is even weaker. We get a bunch of decent action pose and actually fun action scenes in there, but all from other heroes. We don't see anything from Cameron, which is very annoying if you think that the title of this book is City Boy. Backgrounds, though, are generally really good, and they vary from city to forest, so we have a decent variety of things. You can see here in the visions that Cameron are having, it works what is being used there. The backgrounds for the cities are actually really good. Nothing to complain about there, at least. The avatars of the city are also really cool. I really like the Metropolis avatar the most out of the 3. I still think that the Bloodhaven and Gotham creatures should be switched. I'm not sure who agreed to that in the first place. The Mother avatar, however, is really boring. It also does absolutely nothing throughout the entire story. So I'm not even sure if it's any relevant in terms of its presence. Parademons are also really boring. I mean, we've seen them so many times in so many places that they're not as fun as they used to be. I would like Mokkarison to have his own goons. It would be a lot better than the Intergang people who all have the same face, or the Parademons, who are the most common type of disposable villain right now in DC. The forest scene at the end is also really, really great, with the one where Cameron's walking towards Bloodhaven. This here is what it should look like if you're drawing a good cityscape in the back and a good forest around it. The panel work in this is rather interesting. We get a lot of double pages, some nice panel bleed, some nice inclusions here and there, breaking panels. So this here is set up like it should in terms of layouts, and I'm happy to see what they've tried here. Now let's talk about the story a bit more, and there's quite a few things to actually talk about here. Really, descending has no impact. Cameron doesn't defeat his villains. Cameron doesn't do much, actually, throughout the entire series. But here, it should have been his big finale, his big moment, and all we get is him mourning the death of his mom. So I'm not sure what the actual impact they were expecting to have here would be. He doesn't either defeat really his self-doubt either. I mean, that's the idea behind the character, I guess, that he has doubts and he has some issues that he needs to work out, but the only thing that he can work out here is that he now accepts that his mom is dead. He doesn't accept that she didn't love him. He doesn't accept that she abandoned him. He doesn't accept that he might not be the best person out there. All we really have is, yeah, your mom's dead. Live with it. I mean, it's something, I guess, but not what would be giving a good impact as the sixth book in this series. Dr. Mokkarison, whatever, is really pathetic. He is also a non-entity throughout this whole thing. Cameron could have had this entire story with just Mokkarison giving him his powers at the start. I thought he had died when the story started, and that might have even been better for the story if that was the case. It really feels forced to have him be a villain here. I'm not sure what the whole plot behind him is. And since we'll never see him again, more than likely, well, what's the reason for his existence in this story? He should have died at the start and would have maybe left more of an impact in that case. Darkseid wanting to take over the Earth is normal and okay, nothing special. But I don't feel like this was a viable plan from the start. The only thing I can say is that Darkseid should be voiced by Weird Al going forward in every single incarnation that DC wants to put out. Not only because Weird Al needs to work, because it's always fun for him to work, but because it actually makes Darkseid hilarious while extensively threatening at the same time. I think one of the biggest flaw here is that Cameron is never the hero he should be throughout this entire series. It doesn't even work as an origin story run because we get a very short origin and nothing around it. All we get is self-doubt, him realizing he's actually a sociopath, but we can't say that's a bad thing, and him visiting various cities. It really isn't all that much. The previous 5 books actually set us up, and we could have had something really good here. Honestly, it didn't work. There should have been one of 2 outcomes in this particular book. Cameron going in this city, fighting Dr. Mokkarison and winning, or Cameron joining the Darkseid and fighting the heroes. My expectations were subverted completely, as we didn't get either of those things in this book. Cameron and City Boy does absolutely nothing in this book, and in almost any of the other book. I mean, we could take them out of the story and just have the cities get mad, and we might even have had a better story. Who's to blame for this? Well, that's where it's a little bit hard. Should we blame the author? Well, he had an idea and he worked it out. Should we blame the editor? There's very few editing mistakes here and editing issues. The thing is well paced. The thing is well set up. There's nothing that could or should have been completely cut out. In the end, I really think the 2 of them, the writer and the editor, should have sat together and be like, what do we really want to do? If they wanted to do a psychological drama or trauma story, sure, it would work, but don't do it as a superhero origin story. Just do a drama comic and nobody will buy it, and that's going to be it. I'm not even sure if making it a superhero story increased the sales in this case, because City Boy's never been into any tracking list, and it's not like anybody's really talking about it. I think the issue here is that they didn't have a clear plan, and they didn't know what they were going to do. Like I said, this is not poorly paced. It is well done. Each issue is its own thing. Each issue has its own resolution. It works fairly well, but the entire thing feels hollow because there is barely anything at the end to keep us entertained. This one really doesn't feel well connected to the previous issue either, because Cameron was trying to leave the forest at the end of the previous one, and this one he's sticking around. There's a bit of things that are mixed up here. We do have a chunk of action, so that does at least have something to tie everything together, but the ending itself is lame, and there's nothing interesting about it. Now, how would I have done it? And how would I edited it or asked the author to do? Well, there's actually not much changes that were needed in order to make this a better series. Book 1 introduces your new hero, his powers, and his challenges. You actually introduce him using avatars of the city and stuff in the first book, and show him with abandonment issue and maybe a sociopathic side in the first book. Here, there's a little bit of a change that I would have done. Maybe show his powers a little bit more in issue 1 rather than just have him use the city GPS. But it's not a huge change there. Issue 2 should really have been to introduce our villain, his objective, and give a challenge to our hero. Mokkarison wants to use Cameron's power to create a new apocalypse. We get that in this particular issue already, but Mokkarison is not a threat. He's too weak to be able to fight someone with the powers Cameron has, and his whole plan basically requires Cameron to actually be a complete sociopath. So the idea behind Mokkarison should be him trying to drive Cameron into sociopathic behavior and trying to destroy humanity. That would have made more sense. Issue 3, Cameron loses control of his power, Superman fights the Avatar, and teaches Cameron about right and wrong. This issue is really good from the start. You should just add a little bit more action to it, and it would have been even better. Issue 4, Cameron goes to Bloodhaven and searches for his mom. You have him team up with Nightwing, and they fight Mokkarison in this issue. Take off the sob story about the poor Vietnamese woman. That doesn't matter. That's completely separate from what you need and what you want. You want to be focusing on your characters and focusing on action. Issue 5, City Boy runs away from Bloodhaven and hides in the forest. That's very good. Swamp Thing being in this issue is very good, but they should be fighting in this issue. It should be city versus nature. So Cameron should be summoning an avatar of this city to fight Swamp Thing and his avatar of the green. At the end of the issue, they get together. They learn that each other are actually good people. Swamp Thing starts explaining to City Boy how to better control his powers. And finally, our issue 6 is Mokkarison telling Cameron that his mother is dead, not Cameron finding it out with Swamp Thing. And him trying to push, once again, Cameron into being a good, proper sociopath. Cameron decides to do what is right and defeats Dr. Mokkarison himself and takes him out completely, or sends him to prison, or he defeats him enough that he gets sent to Apocalypse, something along those lines. You see, I haven't changed the story itself. What I've done, if I were to redo this, add action, add action, add action. Then add consequences to the actions themselves and make Mokkarison a much bigger threat. This would have made the entire series much, much better. The plot itself would remain the same. The story elements would remain the same. You'd have the same cameos. Everything remains the same in that regards. But things now are relevant. And we have the one thing people actually want to buy superhero comics for, which is action. This is what makes this story a slog, not a slot. We get no cool superhero action in our superhero book. And all the drama we get is actually not interesting enough to keep us around because it's a character we do not know. In the end, this series was actually completely useless. Cameron won't come back unless someone decides that ESG is required at this point in time and they need money. So they pull out We Are Legends again for another run. We never see him in his old costume. He doesn't use the City Boy moniker. The only person who calls him that is actually Superman. It's definitely not something that I would put forward. If I really want to read a story about a sociopath having mummy issues, I will go grab Monster. It's a much better comic as far as a manga goes. It actually has great characters and wonderful action pieces. And it's a realistic story, unlike a superhero book. With Descending, this is not a trade paperback that I would recommend to anyone. It's not worth it, since the character is pointless. We won't see him again, once again, unless they have to push ESG on us again. We Are Legends is probably a dead publishing initiative and brand. It's really up to you, as usual, but this is not something I would put under the Christmas tree or ask for my birthday or anything of the sort. But thank you very much for listening to me for so long. Thank you for going through City Boy with me. I will see you guys later. Keep on reading comics. Keep on enjoying them. I'll keep reviewing and analyzing them. Bye-bye.